If you've watched my previous videos, you've heard me talking about car control and some track experience. But then you're probably asking yourself, like, why am I listening to this guy? Is he some kind of expert or something? So I wanted to take time today and talk a little bit about my background and maybe provide a little bit of credibility to my driving experience. It all starts in the year 2000. So for my 40th birthday, my wife gets me a gift certificate to a Richard Petty track experience at Dover International Raceway in Dover, Delaware. So this was my introduction into, high-speed driving and whatnot. What was kind of unique or interesting about that is my birthday's early in the year, and this actual event took place on Mother's Day. So kudos to my wife, not only getting me this, but then going to the track with me to this experience actually on Mother's Day. I want to share a little bit about that experience at that event because it was kind of interesting. So, we show up in the morning. I think there's about 10 of us there, something like that. And you go and, so you meet at the infield, you sit in this meeting room, they talk to you about how the day's gonna go and whatnot. And then they take you out on a familiarization lap around the track. Now we do this in a 10-passenger kind of van, right? So real tall, nothing that's low to the ground. And they take us around the track, kind of showing us the line, talking about the track history. So as we're going around the track, we come into, some of the banking on the track, and they take that banking really high, meaning on the high end closest to the spectator stands. And that particular track, I think, has a 24-degree banking. So those of you that, understand, degrees in banking, 24 degrees may not sound like a lot, but when you're on the top end of that and you're looking down and you're in a van and everybody's faces are kind of pushed up against the window, it's pretty high. Now, some of you are familiar with, Daytona International. I think Daytona's like 38-degree banking, so it's even more steep, but 24 is pretty steep. Anyway, we go around, do those, okay, get settled in, okay, bring us back down. You go into the meeting room, and there they're gonna talk, through how the day's gonna run with a lead follow. So they're gonna send a pro out, and then I think it's 5 cars behind that pro, and you go around the track. So after that meeting, we all suit up, so that's full racing suit, helmets, gloves, the whole 9 yards. We get out to the cars, a little bit of familiarization with the car, and then you have to get in the car, right? And so this is my first time, we typically don't get in our cars by climbing through the window. At least I don't, maybe some of you do. So that was interesting, get that leg in and just kind of getting yourself all twisted. So anyway, you get in, they help you put on the 5-point harnesses. As you know, the year's 2000, so this is actually pre-Hans device. And then, it's a manual, what is it? 4-speed, and I can drive manual, so that wasn't a real big deal. So then we go out on the track. There's the lead car, a car behind that person, and I'm the third car. So off we go around the track, just kind of going slowly at first, kind of building up speed, making sure everybody's getting through the gears and whatnot. So we go around, and I think it was about the 3rd lap in, they call us down into the pit. So we pull off the track and we go into the pit area. And I'm like, what's running through my head is, what did I do wrong? Immediately it's like, all right, I did something. They're gonna call you in and go, yo, dude, like, you suck. You really need to leave. So we pull in, and then they wave to me, and they're doing like this. And I'm like, all right, they want me to get out of the car? I wasn't sure. So they said, no, just pull around. So I pull around the other guy, and they're like, he's going slow. He's holding up other traffic. We want to get you up here. We're going to move him to the back. Great. I was happy because I kind of felt he was going a little slow, but I was a little nervous too in the car, so I wasn't sure. So next we get out on the track. Now we're having a little bit of fun because I can pick up the pace a bit and going around the track. So we do our next, 6, 7 laps. And then somewhere around lap 8 or so, the pro decides he's just going to take off. And I mean, he just he's gone. I come around a turn, I don't even see him going around the next turn. And I'm like, oh, so he's probably like, so you thought you were going fast around the track? So that's where I learned, yeah, I probably wasn't going that fast. What was interesting then is during that day, we also got to do what they call hot laps around the track with a pro. So you hop in the passenger seat of the car and the pro takes you around the track. And you do communicate. He's kind of telling you how to steer that car. You know, one of the things I thought was interesting is that as you're coming to the end of the turn in the banking where you think you need to unwind the wheel, I remember him saying one more tug on the wheel before you actually start to unwind the wheel. But going around the track at speed with him, I was totally addicted. So that was a really cool experience. This is 2000. So not a lot happened between 2000, about 2004, 2005, between family. I made a move in there, moved from Maryland to Kentucky. So there was a lot going on. And so in 2004, you've heard me talk about E46 M3. I purchased an E46 M3. And while I never tracked that car, I did actually take it on a track. So what happened was one fall back in 2005, maybe 2006, Kentucky Speedway here in Kentucky had this thing where if you bought, what was it, for every $25 you spent in their gift shop, something like that, $25, you got a lap around the track, a lead follow around the track. So I go up there, you know, I dump, I don't know what the heck I did, $150 or something crazy on, you know, toys, you know, car related, speed track related toys. And you get this little certificate. Okay, take the certificate, drive down the road, go under the tunnel to the track, go by the garages. Okay, so here I go, drive over there, pull your car in the garage, and just do a quick check on your car, make sure, you know, tire pressures, you know, talk to you, make sure you're not some knucklehead. And then they say, okay, you're gonna go out, follow that guy around the track. Now, when I happened to be there, there was like nobody else there. And so I was like, all right, cool. So I go up, the guy comes over, we chat for a minute, and I go, so how fast are we gonna go around this track? I forget, this is a 1.5 mile, kind of tri-ovalish type track, Kentucky Speedway. He says, you know, I can only do about 70, so we're gonna go 70 and you can just follow me. And then he goes, well, if you get really close to my bumper, I'll pick up the pace some. So I said, okay. So we go out, do a couple of laps. I think I'm supposed to get like, whatever, you do the math, 5, 6 laps. So we get out there and after whatever, 4 or 5, I'm on his butt. And all of a sudden he's like, okay, you want to play the game? And he's just in, you know, a regular street car too. And all of a sudden we pick up the speed and I don't know, we're doing about 100 miles an hour around this track. And I was probably out there for, I don't know, 10 or 12 laps. So it was a lot of fun. I had a really good time. And then it reminded me, I need to get into this. I need to do this. We're gonna fast forward now on to 2009. So 2009, I buy my first Porsche, the Carrera S. And when you buy a Porsche here from the local dealer, Bluegrass Motorsport, come on, Andy. They sponsor a DE if you want to do it, you know, driver's education, high performance driver's education. They sponsor that for you. So they said, hey, you know, since you bought a new car, you get this, you know, weekend DE on us. Of course, you have to pay for your, you know, your gas and your lodging, but they'll pay for the event. I said, cool, I'm in. I had a great time years ago. I'm ready to get back into this and see what this Porsche can do. So signed up and ready to do my first event. Now this is my first event as a beginner, right? First time on track. So when you do these events, this is through the Porsche Club of America. It was the Kentucky region. You go to the track and, you know, typically you go up on a Friday and the event is Saturday or Sunday, especially for the beginners. So head up, drive the Porsche up to the track. It's about 3 hours away. Get there on a Friday evening because, you know, they give you a lot of information ahead of time. Do this, do this, do this, and they'll tell you more on the Friday evening. So preparing for the track, you know, I have to buy a helmet, you know, certain things that I need, and they kind of lay that all out for you, what you have to bring and how you need to prepare your car, get a tech inspection. I'm not going to go through all that because this isn't a DE video. So anyway, head up, go to the track. I'm nervous. I don't know anybody, right? And I'm going to do this thing on the track. So I go up there, get in the room, and they have a Bluegrass sponsors a dinner that evening. Back then, they used to do a barbecue, cooking burgers and hot dogs, have some beers and stuff around. people sitting around talking. I'm kind of looking for someone to talk to. So I finally catch up with a guy, looked like he was new too, and he was. And we started chatting, kind of connected, and hung out for the weekend. We eat. When we're done eating, now it's time, kind of get yourself registered and whatnot. So part of that registration process is, you go over and they give you a wristband, one wristband to get on the track, and then another wristband for your run group. And typically most Porsche clubs break it into 4 run groups. They can go from beginner as a D to most advanced as an A. There's also instructor, but that's for another conversation. This particular club does green for beginner, then yellow, then blue, then red for advanced. So I'm a green. So now they give you a green wristband that you proudly wear and walk around telling everybody, hey, look at me, I'm the new guy. I have no clue what the hell I'm doing. So for some folks, I'm sure they're probably chuckling. But for others, folks start come up to you and start talking. Hey, it's your first time, and kind of help you get comfortable. So that was great. So go to bed Friday night, nervous. Just because I'm going to take this car on track. I've never done it before. Get up Saturday morning, head to the track bright and early in the morning, driver's meeting, all that good stuff, and meet my instructor. Later I learned my instructor actually wrote the classroom training, so I lucked out. I got a really good guy. He's a professor at a university in Illinois. His name is Chuck, and God, he was really, really good. I got very fortunate for my first instructor. So kind of meet, then go up to the classroom. You do a classroom session as a beginner before you ever get on the track, because they kind of familiarize you with the track, talk about handling. You got to learn all these flags. What do all the flags mean? So I get out of the class and there is just nervous energy. My legs are just twitching, arms are like, the adrenaline's pumping through my system. Finally, we get out on the track, and Chuck is really good explaining to me things on the track. He really is focusing on, track awareness, and each time out, we're focusing on 2 or 3 things. We have 4 25-minute sessions. So at the end of the first day, we all get together again. There's Bluegrass sponsors dinner in the evening. And I remember talking to the other guy, and I was like, gosh, I don't believe we only get 4 sessions a day, 25 minutes. Just doesn't seem like a lot of time. But lo and behold, about 8:30 that evening, I was doing everything I could to stay awake. I think that adrenaline rushing through your body and through your system just makes you so nervous. And at 9 o'clock at night, I was in bed. So next day, Sunday, start over again. We have classroom thing out on the track. Chuck was really teaching me about awareness on track. So that's knowing where the corner worker stations are. So if there's a flag, a yellow flag or red flag, I'm not going to go into that. You can look that up. Or black flag, you know what to do, or blue flag. And also when people are around you, so you can give them the point by all DE events, most all run groups, you have to give a point by for the person behind you to pass. You can't just pass people because it's not racing. So you have to literally point to which side of the car you want them to pass you on. So he made me just aware of that, so I wasn't holding up people. So that was really helpful, and then really teaching me the line around the track and how to use be controllable and smooth with the pedals and steering and whatnot. So thank you, Chuck, for all of that. So Sunday we're out there. Probably the second or maybe the third run of the day, Chuck says, hey, pull into the hot pits. So we pull in and he says, I'm like, all right, what's going on? And he says, hey, I'm going to solo you, which means that, you can go out on the track without an instructor in the car. So they put a little solo sticker on there, pull in, the chief instructor comes over, they all kind of clap for you. It's something they do as an accomplishment, right? Hey, you've been out there, you've learned something, so we're going to send you out there on your own. So I was excited, but again, that nervous energy inside of me. And for the rest of the day, those remaining sessions going around the track, I kept hearing Chuck in my ear. I just, because things he was teaching me, I was just, remembering what he was saying and what he was telling me to do to go around the track. And ended up having a great time. It was a blast. Early in the day, the friend and I, we were comparing notes on how fast we were going down the straightaway. oh man, like I saw 110 miles an hour. And, we were all excited. Wow, 110, because, where else do you really drive 110 legally out on the street? And, at that same track today, I'm probably doing 140 miles an hour, or even a little more down that straightaway. So over the years, just as you get comfortable and you just know what you're doing, it's funny how things change. Your perspective changes. So that was the first DE event. And even to this day, I go to a DE event, I'm probably still in bed no later than 9:30, because it just wipes you out. And maybe that's just me, the way my energy builds up. So that takes us through that first DE in 2009. Now I'm going to fast forward several years and get to the point where now, you're moving up through the different run groups. You're getting more advanced. I think by now I was probably in that blue, or what they call a B run group. The local Porsche dealer, Bluegrass Motorsport, who sponsors a lot of the DEs, also brings up instructors from the Porsche track experience at Barber Motorsports Park. So over the years, I've had the opportunity to sit with have a lot of different people sit in that right-hand seat of the car. And I just want to go through a few of those with you. So one of the folks that I was coached by over the years was Cass Whitehead. And Cass Whitehead is the chief instructor at Porsche Track Experience down in Barber Motorsports Park. And he has an accomplished history as a race car driver over the years and whatnot. And one of the things that I really appreciated about Cass was, one, is his calming voice. When you're in the car with Cass, he's not like yelling at you because, the loud noises. He's very calm. His voice is very soothing. He would be the type that if you were going off the track and you're ready to crash, he'd just be like, both feet in, look where you want to go, just nice and calm. But what Cass really taught me was about being smooth. And being smooth, is when you're turning on the wheel, you're not doing like this, and then your brake isn't like on and off, and you're making the car do this because you're just herky-jerky. Was really about that transition from the brake as you come off the brake into the gas, nice and smooth, and then from the gas to the brake, it's quick, it's firm, but it's, again, being smooth. And also another way he taught me about being smooth is to get out on the track and drive in the wet. Because in the rain, you'd be amazed. You go around a track at 30, 35 miles an hour in the wet, and because there's a lot of rubber built up on the track, it's real easy to start sliding around. And what better time to learn car control, your car moving around, is doing that like on a wet surface and in a controlled environment, right? There's not a bunch of other cars around. Typically, there's not many or very few on the track when it's wet. And it gives you time to practice, kind of car control. Then when it's dry, the smoothness you learned by driving in the wet, because your inputs need to be smooth, otherwise you get the car to kick out, all of a sudden you find yourself getting faster in the dry. So that was a real aha moment for me, is learning the car control and being smooth in the wet, and that transferred to gaining a lot of speed in the dry. So I thank Cass for the time, and I spent a lot of time with Cass in my car over the years, and then also looking at on the Porsche Track Precision app, analyzing the data with Cass as well. He was pretty good at helping me with the data. You're coasting here, you need to get on the gas sooner here, things like that. He would coach me on. So a couple other folks I got to spend some time with. One was John Lewis. John, also an instructor at Porsche Track Experience. And John, he and Cass are like the yin and the yang. They typically come up together. John is like, woohoo, let's go fast. And let's push this baby. And if you go around a turn and the car slides, he's like, yeah, that's good. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm out of control. And he's like, he's loving it. So he's a lot of fun having in the car. John really teaches you a line around the track that might be a little bit different than what you learned initially, right? Because as a beginner, we teach folks to be safe. We want them to learn, we want them to have fun, but we want them to be safe. Once you start moving up and getting more advanced, there's different lines around the track, And so John was helping me with these different lines and faster lines around the track. You've probably heard this expression, slow in, fast out, but race drivers it's really fast in, fast out, but it's doing it controlled. Anyway, John really helped me on changing the line and coming with an approach to getting around the track quickly. The second thing, key takeaway, and you hear me talk about it a lot, is about weight management. And he used to tell me that your job is to maximize the contact patch on the pavement. And you've heard me say this, right? If that car had equal amount of weight on all four tires, you'd have great contact patch. That car would be planted, that car wouldn't move, right? But we know that doesn't happen, right? There's forces at play, leaning into turns, braking, accelerating. But still, the idea of being smooth and what you can do to maximize the contact patch. It's not going to be perfect, but how do you maximize it? So John was really big on that. He was also big on making these micro adjustments. So sometimes you see people go through turns and, we don't necessarily go through a turn and we just hold our wheel and we lock it. Some turns you can do that, but most you can't. And then you also find you have to make these little micro adjustments as you feel the rear end kind of moving around. You're just making some, so he helped me with those, I'll say micro adjustments as you're going through and doing throttle steering. So actually steering around the track using the throttle. And then John also helped me to gain some confidence where then you can pick up your speed. The last two folks I'll cover real quick are one, I got to sit with a pro, Dan Clark, and spent some time in the car with Dan Clark. And probably the biggest takeaway I got from Dan was the idea about steering input. And what I mean by that is when folks go around the track a lot of times, and myself included, you're afraid to turn the wheel. You go and you're like, okay, I'm turning, it's going, because we're afraid if we turn it too sharp, either we'll go off the track or the rear end's gonna kick out on us. And Dan was saying, like on a lot of turns, you can put in like 90 degrees of steering input into the turn. He would say, get on that wheel, turn it, and make the car turn as, hoping that the force brings you around the turn. So that was really helpful on really getting on that wheel and cranking it to go around a turn. So that was good. And then the last person was Dane Cameron. Dane races IMSA and GT stuff and whatnot. And having Dane in the car, Dane was pretty good, but he's a young guy, and this is even going back probably like 3-4 years ago maybe. And he's like, about going fast. So as we were going around the track, he spent the first few laps just seeing what I was doing and trying to get a feel for it. And then once he knew that, this guy kind of knows what he's doing, he has really good control of the car, Dane was pushing me on speed. You can go faster, the grip is there. And then as we went faster, you start adjusting your braking points, etc. Because now you're going into a turn faster. Oh, I used to brake at this marker. Maybe I was braking at the 200. Now I need to brake maybe at the 300 foot mark because I am just carrying a ton more speed into that turn. So those were some takeaways from Dan. So over the years, I could see, especially at the same track, you see your lap times coming down and you're like, okay, this is good, I'm getting better. But one of the things I learned, and a lot of you out there probably similar, is the learning curve goes up really fast. And you're like, oh man, I got this thing down. I can be a race driver. I'm gonna be at the track. Someone's gonna discover me and, hey, this kid needs to be in, NASCAR and Formula One. Yeah, right. But what you learn is all of a sudden you plateau. And the learning becomes very incremental, or you get to a flat spot and you're like, shoot, my times, I'm not getting any better. I guess this is it for me. So then you get a little discouraged and people will say, oh, it's just more seat time. It's just more seat time. And that's when other people say, well, I need to make modifications to my car. I need more horsepower. I need better springs. I need better tires and all this stuff to make me go faster because now I flattened out. And what some of the professionals will tell you is, and maybe it's self-promotional, but what they'll tell you is you probably need to invest in training as opposed to investing in your vehicle. And the way I saw that as proof was any of you that have ever been to a track where there's a pro maybe giving rides, hot laps around the track and say a new model. Like at our track, they'll bring the like, oh, here's the new Cayman, here's a new, 911 Panamera, whatever. They'll take you around the track. And when you see a guy in a Cayman S, one of these pros in a Cayman S, chase down GT3s and GT3 RSs and pass them, you go, yeah, it's probably the driver and not the car, right? These cars, none of us are driving these cars at 9 or 10 tenths. So I was like, okay, this makes sense. I need to go get some more training. Okay, so let's see, we're probably moving on to about 2015, 2016, somewhere in there. And I'm like, all right, I need some more training because, beginning to plateau, I'm not feeling myself advance anymore. And I want to get better. That's just the way I am. I'm not in this just to do it and just be, okay, this is as good as it is. I'm always trying to push myself and learn and become better at what I do. And so at one of the DE events I was at, there was another gentleman there. He was an instructor, but he wasn't instructing that day, I don't think. I think he was just visiting there, whatever. And started talking to him, and I found out that he does simulator training, and he's located in Indianapolis, and he actually works with professional drivers. And I was like, oh, maybe that's that next level I need to get to. So I remember sitting there talking with him a little bit and chatting. His name is Kelly Jones, and he's with Racecraft One in Indianapolis. I remember talking to Kelly and, saying, hey, what can we do? And so he kind of worked through, here's kind of what I offer and what I can bring to the table for you and help get you to the next level. So I said, all right, well, what does it take to come up and spend a day with him? So we worked it out, and it was a really very reasonable price to go up and work with him for a day, and actually did 2 days because I stayed overnight at a local hotel, which was like walking distance from his location, and did 2 days with him of simulator training. What's really interesting about Kelly, and just as a side note, I plan on doing an interview with Kelly at some point here in the near future, so stay tuned for that video. He's graciously agreed to do that. The really interesting thing about Kelly is he's a retired F-18, I'll say fighter pilot. I don't know what better word to say, but he's the real deal. And he even became an instructor in the Air Force. So he was teaching other, well, I'll say F-18, but probably other jets as well. He was teaching others as well in jets. So he basically took that knowledge. He got into racing. He had raced bikes and whatnot over the years, and then cars as well. And he said, hey, I think some of these skills are transferable from doing, teaching pilots to teaching, folks in a race car. So we go up there and we do a combination. It's a combination of like sit down at a table. And by the way, this is one-on-one training. Sitting down at the table, kind of walking through, again, car control techniques, all those things. We talk a lot about weight management, forces at play, steering angles. There's just a lot of technical stuff we cover, like in a classroom type session. Then we go on to the simulator. So the first thing with the simulator, those of you that have sims probably know this as well, is just getting used to the simulator, right? Simulators are different, even though this has all those motions back and forth and jiggling on and you feel some of it, it's different than actually being in the car. So you have to learn to listen for things like the tires on the car in the simulator. You have to, there's other senses that you have to kind of pay attention to in a simulator that's different than maybe sitting in the car, a real car on the track. So we practice, I think the first few hours we're just really learning the simulator, working on a really simple track on how to understand how the car is responding to the braking, etc. He has iRacing, but initially he's not using iRacing. He's using a different program just to kind of help familiarize yourself. And I'll tell you, once we got onto the iRacing, I was like just totally blown away by how much adjusting you can do to the car and the settings. I was like, holy crap. But anyway, we did that, and then back to the classroom, sit down, go through stuff. I remember as we're working through the car control, we're going around the track, and he had me drive in the pouring rain. I mean, they can set the sim with different scenarios, and one was just, pouring rain. And the idea there was to get the car to get out of control, and you making the inputs to kind of get it back in control. So I'm going around the track, and I'm being I'm gingerly going about it. And Kelly is like, why are you taking it easy? Like, come on, pick it up. And I'm like, well, I don't want to crash. He's like, what are you afraid of? So a couple times he literally had me floor it, go down the straightaway. There's a wall at the end. No, keep it to the floor. Go. And you hit the wall and the car tumbles on screen, and you don't feel nothing. And he looks over at me and he's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm all right. He goes, all right, so what are you afraid is going to happen? I was like, okay. So we go around again, and here I am. I'm still being like timid about really pushing the car. So finally he's like, push, go. And we get the car to, spin out of control, do things, and okay, what are the inputs you need to make, etc. And, and so we go into day 2, and, we're doing these same things on day 2. And so I remember, what was it at one point? What did he say? We're going around, we lose control. And one of the nice things about the simulators is I'm sitting there and he's like in a chair next to me, is he can kind of rewind it. And so we're just watching the car, we're rewinding, we're playing back sections slowly and whatnot. And so he's like, okay, you're coming around here. The car is starting to lose control here. Now let's watch to see, where do you actually start making your corrections, whether it's throttle, brake, steering, where you start making your corrections to the car. So we go through, and it was like, okay, so it starts here, you start making corrections like, I don't know, 5 seconds later. And he's like, why were you waiting? Did you feel the car starting to lose control here? Yeah. And why did you not make your input there? And I'm like, I don't know. And so he was really driving home. You feel that, or you felt it happening, you need to make your correction at that time. You can't wait 3 or 5 seconds later, because it's too late. You can't do anything, right? Depending on how far whacked the car is getting, you can't do anything to, quote, save it. So it's really about, when you feel it, what to do. That was a huge takeaway from him. And then the other huge takeaway working with him was really on techniques about oversteer and understeer. So oversteer, right, the rear end kicking out on you, and understeer as the car pushes, the car doesn't want to turn. Knowing what to do when those things happen, both on turn entry and turn exit. So, it's those, whatever, 4 things, right? Oversteer on entry, oversteer exit, understeer entry, understeer exit. What I learned through those 2 days, and I went back and did another 2 days, was once you know, understand, and apply those learnings, your fear for losing control reduces. I won't say it minimizes or goes away, but it reduces, because you now know what to do when the car gets out of control. So on track, a lot of times I would take it easy. I wouldn't push real hard, because I didn't want the car to start spinning or doing things, because if it started to do that, I wouldn't know what the hell to do. Then just go for a ride and let it spin and crash and do whatever. But once you understand what to do, all of a sudden I found myself going faster and being more comfortable, because I knew what corrections to make, and I knew how to, quote, save it, I guess you would say. So that was some of the real huge learning there. And then the other thing I really used Kelly for a lot was whenever I was going to a new track, I would always go and spend a day with him to just learn that track on the simulator. I remember doing this very specifically with Watkins Glen, the time I went to Watkins Glen. I've done it for other tracks as well. But at Watkins Glen, we just went through and just kept going and going, lap after lap, fixing where I was, entries wrong. Let's move this back, do this, et cetera, getting around the track. And then we moved up, we were in iRacing, super realistic. So now I could start looking for reference points. So when you turn, you're looking for a marker or a reference point, knowing where to brake. I just found that was super helpful. So not just the line around the track and getting familiar with the track, which was a goal. It was also getting those reference points down, because I knew when I went to Watkins Glen, I hadn't been there before, and I wasn't going to be able to get into an advanced group where I could do 3 days of driving versus the typical 2. So I wanted to maximize my time. So when I got to Watkins Glen, I actually had an instructor in the car with me, and we're going around the track, and it was all very familiar to me. So we're going around, and he's like, have you ever been here before? I was like, no. And he's like, man, you really got this down. And, I don't know, I didn't want to say anything that I had that, cause I said, I've been watching a lot of videos and stuff like that. And so, it was like that, I think it was the first or second session, he soloed me off on the car, and I had a blast. That track was a ton of fun. So that's, some of that experience, now moving to the simulator training, picking up to get yourself faster. I go back to my home track at Putnam Park, and if I look back to where I was as a beginner way back in 2009 and to where I am today, there's probably 12 to 14 seconds I've picked up on that track. It's a 1 3/4 mile, 1.78 10 turn track. So it's amazing what you can gain, but it takes your focus and dedication to, seat time, but then also getting training that you might not be able to get from just a regular instructor, because, folks who aren't professionals and do that for a living. So that was a really good investment. Okay, so let's bring this all home. So in 2016, after some coaxing for some friends, I then realized that it was time to, pay this forward, if you will. And by meaning that pay it forward was by becoming an instructor and teaching folks what I've learned over the years to help them become better drivers. So I signed up for the instructor training. So in the instructor training, they're not teaching you how to drive, right? Or whatever, because you know how to drive. What they're teaching you in instructor training is how to teach, how to teach driving techniques specifically. So that was one of the learnings was, okay, they're going to teach you how to teach. And so the way they do it, that setting, there's a qualified, an already, improved, whatever, a certified instructor in the class who you're paired up with. You kind of do role playing, right? So the instructor person who's kind of assessing you, they're playing the student, you're playing the instructor. So you do classroom training, then you go out on the track, you do the introduction. Hey, nice to meet you. My name's Andy. How are you? Wow, it's a really nice car you have. Tell me about your car. Have you done anything to it? Right, because you're trying to find out, did they make modifications? Are they safe? Blah, blah, blah. And so you just go through, that first introduction thing, getting the student to be calm, because like I know when I was new, you're super nervous. So your job as an instructor is help calm them down, let them know that you're there. It's about learning, it's about safety, it's about having fun. Those 3 things always. So throughout the day, back to the classroom, back out doing role playing. And then at the end of the day, for kind of your sign off, if you will, session, they give you a totally new instructor. So an instructor who hadn't been working with you the entire day. And then that person goes out with you. And when you're done, that instructor plus the one that was working with you for the day, fill out an evaluation form. And then at the end of the day, you kind of wait around and you wonder, like, did I pass? Because you always hear these stories like, oh, everybody passes. Most, I don't think I've ever heard of somebody who didn't. And then you're sitting there going, am I going to be the first one? So anyway, it's me. So anyway, later that, late afternoon, you realize that, hey, you passed. Yay! Now here's the good news, they say. The good news is now tomorrow, because typically that training happens on a Friday and it happens during a DE weekend. Now all of a sudden Saturday, guess what? You have a student and you're like, oh, so remember early on I was telling you about all those nerves and everything? Well, that all kicks in again, because now you're like, wow, I have to getting in the right seat of a car. That part didn't bother me. It was really about, am I going to remember all the techniques and all the things that you kind of have to go through? And there's an instructor checklist. So I have this little booklet they give you that you can kind of go through and refresh yourself. And it was like, I was wondering, am I going to be good? Are they going to like me? All those types of things are running through my head. And, I got to get in the car. I got to get my communicator on. I got to get them plugged in. We got to make sure his helmet's on, seatbelt's on, stuff's out of the car. We get down to the grid in time. Like all these things are running through my head. And so anyway, it worked. Still nervous the next morning. I'm nervous, working with the student. But as you see that student progress and as you see that student learn and get better throughout the weekend, it's very rewarding and very satisfying. And sitting in the right seat, some folks have said to me, man, you're crazy. You're going to get in the car with someone you don't know and you're going to go around that track. And the thing you have to realize though as an instructor is that you're in complete control. Meaning that if that student does something silly, whether stupid, they make you uncomfortable, etc., you just tell them to go into the pits. And you could talk to them and say, hey, either you're going to listen to me or your weekend's done. Now, if the two of you can't get along, then you can always talk to the chief instructor and maybe get you another, get them paired up with another instructor. But the key is you're in control. You're not going to have them do anything stupid because you're sitting in the right-hand seat. And, typically you have an instructor in a very beginner or kind of early novice intermediate. And they're just not going as fast as you are because you've been doing this for all the years as an instructor. So, remember earlier I said, oh, I'm going down the front straightaway at 110. I think I'm going crazy fast. And now I'm doing it at 140. So they're doing it at 90 or 100. And you're just like, it's safe. If we go off the track, nothing's going to happen to us. One of the things we do at our track is because one of those instructors, while you're going through the training, has to be there as they're playing the role play of your student, that the next time there's an instructor training, they usually happen every 2 years, then you kind of become the role play instructor. So, all right, now it's your turn. So then when they did that a few years later, I became that instructor to role play. And then you go out with the person who's trying to qualify to be an instructor and you help them, right? And you pay it forward for them. So that's how I got into, with instructing and whatnot. Want to add in here a reminder about our upcoming event, RS Xperience sports car series event. We're calling this the Blue Ridge Rally, and it takes place from October 11th to 15th in the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina. As I said earlier, I'm really excited about it. I'm excited to meet folks who want to get out there and don't mind driving their cars, rain or shine. We get out and we drive. And then staying at a really wonderful mountain lodge with some excellent food, and then really just having a really good time, just talking about our experiences, driving and life experiences, whatever. It's a really good time to come together and all what's going on right now. I think there's folks out there who are just looking to get away, be safe, and get away. So we'll have information on our website. There'll be a host of FAQs out there, what we're doing, what the lodge is doing with regard to COVID. And then also we'll be publishing and putting information out on like how the itinerary, how it'll flow, how the event will flow, and what you can expect and what you can do to have a really good time. So it's coming up soon. I think the countdown clock says we're about 30 days out. And if you can't make that event in October, no worries. We have another event in early November. It's an interesting time down there in November because not all of the leaves, most of the leaves will have fallen, but there will be some remainders of some deep browns and some gold colors for some of the leaves that are still out there. But it also gives a different perspective of the roads because without all the leaves on the trees, in some places your sight lines as you're driving are actually a little bit better because you don't have all the greenery, the foliage, filled in, if you will. So it's another interesting time. And the weather down in the mountains, I've been down there in the middle of November, 60 degrees during the day, sunny. The mornings are cool, upper 30s, low 40s, but it warms up pretty quickly. So stay tuned for November. And then later this year, we'll talk about 2021. We'll talk about some of the events. Some will be larger than just the 7 cars that we'll have for both the October and November events. I'm interested in working it out and then sharing with all of you on what that's going to look like for next year, because I got some pretty cool stuff. 21, hopefully we could put COVID behind us and move on. So again, Blue Ridge Rally, October 11th to 15th. Come check it out. Just to finish this up here, some of the high-level stats is on various tracks. Tracks are Putnam Park in Indiana, Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course in Ohio between Columbus and Cleveland. That's like one of my favorite tracks. It's a ton of fun. Has a lot of rhythm, momentum, technical, fast. Same thing with Putnam Park. It's a very safe track. There's only one place you can really get into trouble on that track. If you go off, you're just going to get your car really dirty, but it has a nice rhythm to it. National Corvette Museum Motorsports Park down in Bowling Green, Kentucky. That track is really long. It's 3.2 miles, 23 turns. I went there when it first opened up. No one knew the line around the track. No one, not even the pros. No one knew what the line was. So learning that track, going around that track, I didn't have a really good time. The track felt very herky-jerky, felt like it had no rhythm, and I've never gone back since 2014. Barber Motorsports track, I've been to the Porsche track experience, so the Porsche training school down there. I've been down there and I've done that, and I've probably done 4 DEs down there, maybe 5 driving events. I really like that track. It's technical, not super fast. It's been in really good condition. I know it's getting a little worse now. It probably needs to be repaved. It's probably the most beautiful setting. I always liken this to taking a racetrack and putting it on the Augusta National Golf Course in Georgia. That's the way the setting is at Barber. I mean, between the bushes, the rose bushes, the flowering plants, the trees, the infield all around the edges, it's all irrigated. If you get there early in the morning, I mean, there's the big sprinklers, you like the way I'm doing that? Going around, the infield and along the track. It's a beautiful setting, and plus, if you're into motorcycles, the Barber Museum there has got like all kinds of bikes. I mean, just tons of bikes. It also has a lot of race cars too, from over the years. It's a really cool place. So I really like Barber. I've been to Atlanta Motorsports Park, very technical. It's short. It's like 16 turns, just under 2 miles, I think. Very technical, but that track too, I didn't feel had a lot of rhythm to it. Again, this is just me. And then Watkins Glen International up in Watkins Glen, New York. That was like my first, this is like big time. This is a racetrack. That was 3.2 miles, I think 11 turns, a ton of fun on that track. That track was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed Watkins Glen. It's just so blinking far. Some tracks I need to get to. One is VIR. Everybody tells me Virginia International Raceway. Andy, you haven't been? And then Road America up in Wisconsin. Road America is another one. It's a fast track. So I want to get to that with this puppy. Up there. And then another one I wouldn't mind hitting is Sebring. I know it's bumpy, it's relatively flat, not a lot of elevation change and whatnot, but I know it can be technical. Just have to go, not in the summer, to go down there. I'm very fortunate and to be on this journey, and pleased that my wife introduced me into this sport. Although if you were to ask her, I'm not so sure if she's so happy she introduced me to this sport. But anyway, that's it. So I hope that was helpful for you. So when you hear me yakking about driving and talking about things, that's kind of my progression in the experience that I have. So anyway, take care, everyone. As always, stay healthy and stay safe. Take care. Bye.